Hi everyone and welcome back to another decluttering video. So in today's video I will discuss 25 items or categories of items that you can declutter from your house right now. If you're new here, hi, I am Alice and I am doing an entire series dedicated to decluttering in which I give tips and tricks on how to declutter and what to declutter. And until now I focus more on the wardrobe, but this time I'm focusing on the house, and I will leave all the links to all my other videos up and down below. Now, before starting though, I wanted to remind you that if you are on a minimalism journey, that's amazing, but remember that minimalism doesn't mean having the least amount of things possible. It means having the right amount of things for your life and your lifestyle. This means that if there is something that you have in a huge quantity but has a value for you, in my case it's books, then there's no problem with that. You keep all your books or whatever it is. So that to say that you don't need to declutter necessarily everything that I'm telling you. Mine are just suggestions. You need to apply them to your own lifestyle. Also, the specific amount of things to keep or to declutter will really depends on you, because your needs are different from mine, so you might need more or less things than I do. The other things that I want to say, I hope it is not necessary, but I rather say it and be safe than sorry. And it is when I say to toss, to declutter, to get rid of something, I don't mean that you need to put them into the bin. Please leave the bin as a very last resort. You always need to keep responsibility of what you are decluttering from your house. So try to sell them, donate them, upcycle them and recycle them in this specific order. But now we can start. So number one is old phones and computers. It's finally arrived the time to take the time to go through all your files, keep what you want to keep, and then everything else can be deleted and the device can be either sold or refurbished. Second is cables, chargers, batteries, remotes, all these kind of things that we keep long after we actually got rid of the device that came with the thing in the first place. And that's because we always think that those things can be reused somehow, can always be useful, but they are not, because technology advances and these things are not compatible with the new technology anymore, so there's really no point to keep them. And even when it comes to cables that can actually be reused, consider that we need maybe a couple of cables per type, no more than that. Number three is pictures and files, and that goes for both digital and physical. We do keep a lot of things that we actually don't need, don't like, and that has any value for us. So try to go through all your files and decide what you want to keep and delete all the rest. And finally in this category we have apps, and that's because we download way more apps than we need, and that's a huge distraction. So try to only keep the apps that we actually need and use. So the first things that you really need to delete from your kitchen is scratch pans and pots made in Teflon, which is the black anti-sticky material, and that's because once that is scratched is extremely unhealthy because the particles goes into your food and these are carcinogens, so that really needs to go. And same goes for plastic chopping board. They are very convenient, we all have them. The problem is that they arrive at a point in which they are too scratched and they do start to releasing microplastic in your food, and I don't think that you need me to tell you that plastic in your food is really not a good idea. And you see when they arrive at the point, because you see that they start to losing the plastic. So these unfortunately are things that really need to be thrown away, and that's because if it's unsafe for you to use, it's unsafe for anyone else, so it's really not fair to pass it to someone else. And then we have jars, and I know that we tend to try and hold on to those jars and boxes from supermarkets because we want to reuse them, and that's amazing. But the point is that if we get a little bit overboard and we have more than we can actually use, that doesn't make sense, especially when it comes to jars, because these can be recycled. So keep the one that you're actually using and recycle the other ones. And then we have kitchen appliances. So in this case, try to go through all your kitchen and see what you're actually using and what you need. So first of all, try to keep it keep an eye on the duplicates, and that because a lot of times, especially when you are going to live with someone else, we do start to collect duplicates because of course your things will merge with his or her things, and it wouldn't make a lot of sense to have 3 pots of the exact same size and brands like it happened to me. So keep one and the rest can be donated, and also try to understand if there is something that really doesn't have any use for you. Unfortunately, this is an area where we tend to buy things because we think that we need them and we actually don't. But please keep in mind what is the function of the object, because there are things that we really don't need, but there are other things that maybe we don't use that often, but they are very useful. In my case, for example, I don't use that often a can opener, but that is very useful because trying to open a can without the proper tool is really not a good idea. And then finally here we have food, and I know that that sounds terrible, but bear with me. The problem with food, especially when we buy those kind of dry foods or cans that last for a long time, is that because they last for a long time, we tend to forget about it. But they don't last forever, especially dry food that does make flies, and when you start to have flies, you really risk to ruin your whole pantry, and that's an awful waste of food that is really unnecessary. So try to go through all your pantries regularly and identify the food that is really has been there for a long time, put it at the front, and then use it as quick as possible. Also, if there is something that you realize that you don't use just because you don't like, that's okay, it's no problem with that, but just try to find someone who likes it instead of like leaving it there and let it rot. So the first thing here, and that's a huge thing for me, is pillows and cushions. We do tend to have way more pillows and decorative cushions that we actually need, and that's because there is all these fantastic, lovely pictures on Instagram that shows these fantastic cozy houses, and we all think that we want that. The problem is that those things are incredibly annoying because they take a lot of space, they take a lot of dust, and you need to put them in a nice composition every single morning, because otherwise they will just look messy, and that really drives me crazy. So if you are like me, try to understand what are the things that you want to keep and get rid of the rest. Like in my case, for example, this is the only decorative pillow that for me we could keep, and that's because I really love this one. It makes me happy. I put it on the couch, I put it on the bed, wherever I wanted to have it. So this is something that will stay with me, but all the rest can go. And then we have bed linen, and that's something that we also tend to buy way more than we need because we lack the variety, we like to change, and then we keep them because after all these things don't expire. Well, the first thing I would say is stop buying so much, and then second, keep only the one that you use, and the rest can either be sold, donated or upcycled depending on the state, of course, of the item. And same exact things actually goes for towels. Again, we have more than we need, keep only the one that you need and stop buying. 13 and 14, I put them together, is skincare and makeup, and that is also something that we don't realize how much we accumulate. Even I am always been very minimal when it comes to skincare and makeup, especially makeup, because it's not something I particularly enjoy. I realized that I had so much stuff that I wasn't using. The problem is that again, these things do expire, and for some things in particular it's very important to be careful of the expiration date. So try to go through your stash and see what are you actually using, and what you don't use, you don't like, you don't see why you have it, just give it to your friends. I'm sure you will find someone who will enjoy it. And 15 is any other self-care items, so for example sponges, brushes, makeup brushes, all these kind of things. Again, if there is something that you don't use and you don't enjoy, no point to keep it. So I will put together books, music, films and games, because the reasoning behind it is exactly the same for all these categories, and depending on what person you are, you will probably have more or less of one or the other. But in general, these are things that we tend to attribute a lot of value of, and we do tend to accumulate and to keep. And generally speaking, there is nothing wrong with that, because if there is a value for you in keeping those items, then by all means keep them. It's easy for me to make the example with books. I am absolutely a bookworm, and I do consider giving away books like a crime against humanity. I keep all of them because the majority of them I reread, and even the ones that I don't reread, if I love them, I do love the idea of keeping them to someone I love. So for example, a lot of my childhood books I kept, and now my cousins and friends are having kids, and so I'm giving those books to their kids, and I'm very happy of doing that. But the reality is not all of these things has the same value, not everything has been loved as much, and I arrived at a point in my life in which I realized that I don't really want to keep space to keep books that I didn't enjoy. Those things can be donated to schools, to friends, to programs, I mean to libraries. There are many ways in which you can reuse these books or games or music or whatever without having to clutter your house. Also consider that some things lose value during time. So for example, again, keeping the example of books, I have all my school notebooks, but that doesn't make any sense because those books are completely out to date now, so there's no one I can give them to. Same goes for movies. I still have VHS, I still have recording cassette, but no one has the device to read these cassettes anymore. So now they can only be thrown away, while if I had part with them earlier, then someone else could have enjoyed them while I wouldn't. And then we have notebooks. Now I don't know if this is just me, but I collected so many notebooks during my life, either because people gifted them to me or because I found them super cute and I want them. But the reality is that I don't like writing, I'm not a person that does journaling, so all those things really have no value for me, and I was very happy of gifting them to my mom and my friend who actually love journaling and they are using it. Similarly for school notes and notebooks, if you are a hoarder like me, probably you have kept all of them or you kept one of your kids, but not everything is really such a cheerful memory. I found a lot of notebooks that were just exercises, and those could just be recycled in the paper. And I kept all my notes about humanities subject because this is something I still love and I still use them every once in a while. So it doesn't mean that you need to delete everything, but select what actually has a value and delete the rest. And then we have home decor, and that's something that I loved in the past and now I really hate. Same as the cushion, takes a lot of space, takes a lot of dust. Again, you don't need to delete everything, but try to understand what are the things that really has memory attached to it, that you really love and like, things that you like to see on your wall, on your shelves, etc. And all the rest can honestly go. And next is stationery. I kept a ton of stuff that I was using when I was either in school myself or working with kids that has no use for me anymore. And a lot of these things actually stop working if you don't use them often, because for example, pen, the ink dries. So go through them, keep like a minimum amount that can always be useful, but then the rest can be donated. 24 is anything that you're keeping just because it was expensive or because it was a gift. It doesn't matter what this item is, these are really not good reasons to keep something that you're not using and you're not liking. So it's always better to have someone else having it and enjoying it. 25 is sentimental items, and that's a huge thing, I know, but bear with me. We do keep a lot of things because we have sentiments attached to them, and that's not wrong in itself. The problem is that we do change with time and we don't give the same value to things anymore. So when I went through all those items that I kept because they were sentimental, I realized that a lot of them were not really that sentimental anymore. I was keeping them more out of a habit than out of a real attachment to the item. So try to go through them and be honest with yourself and see what you want to keep. A good way to do that is give yourself a limit. In my case, I decided that I would have had only a box for sentimental items. And in the moment in which I said that to myself, it was very easy to see what were the things that I really couldn't part from and what were the things that actually I didn't care for them anymore. And the last items is sort of like an extra, and that is basket, storage unit, and maybe even furniture. If you did a good decluttering till now, chances are that a lot of these things will probably be empty, and I would honestly recommend you to get rid of them as soon as possible, because the more like empty boxes and furniture we have around, the more we are tempted to refill them again. And the last thing we want after such a big decluttering is to to refill our house with other clutter again. To conclude, I would suggest you to really keep notes of what you are decluttering while you're going on, and try to understand what are the areas in which you are really accumulating a lot of clutter, and keep that in mind when you're going out and buying again. Try to really stop buying as much, especially if you see that these are things that don't really hold that much value for you. And especially when it comes for things that are expiring, like makeup or foods, I would absolutely suggest you to do not buy new stuff until you finish the old ones, because otherwise you will risk to waste these things, and this is something that we absolutely do not want to do. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I was so happy to have you here. If you enjoyed these videos, please consider giving it a thumbs up and maybe subscribing to my channel. And until next time, bye!